Serenity Valley Stories invites you into the shadows. Like and subscribe for more tales that will haunt your nights. And now our feature presentation, The Silent Streets of Paris. I never imagined something like this could happen in the heart of Paris. I always thought that monsters lived in the shadows of forgotten places, dense forests, remote villages, abandoned ruins. But I was wrong. Some monsters hide where you least expect them, twisting reality in ways that make you question your own sanity. It was a Friday night, and Marie and I had decided to take a long walk through the city. We had been dating for a little over a year, and after a long, exhausting week, we wanted nothing more than to enjoy each other's company and the beauty of Paris at night. The evening had been perfect, a late dinner by the Seine, sipping wine and laughing as we lost ourselves in the city's magic. The lights from the restaurants cast shimmering reflections across the river, and the hum of people moving through the city kept the atmosphere alive. It felt so normal, so utterly peaceful. Marie had always loved nights like these, when the city was calmer, more personal. The sound of her laughter echoed in my ears as we strolled down quieter streets, and I couldn't help but feel as though nothing in the world could touch us here. But after dinner, as we wandered deeper into the quieter parts of Paris, the city seemed to change. The warmth and vibrance that we had enjoyed during the evening began to fade. It started slowly, a slight dimming of the street lamps, a cool breeze that seemed a little too cold for the time of year. Marie squeezed my hand tighter, and I realized that I wasn't the only one who felt it. There was a silence creeping over us. The sounds of the city, the cars in the distance, the hum of activity, all fell away until the only thing I could hear was the sound of our footsteps on the cobblestones. Even those seemed to echo unnaturally, bouncing back at us in ways that didn't make sense. Marie glanced at me, her eyes wide, questioning. "Let's go down another street," she whispered. I nodded, trying to shake off the sudden unease that had settled over me. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on us, making it hard to breathe. We turned onto a narrow alley, one of those winding streets with cobblestones that reflected the dim light of flickering street lamps. The night was cool, but the air felt heavy, too heavy. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft, at first, barely audible over our own, but there. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat, and looked behind us. No one was there. "Did you hear that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though fear had already started to creep in. Marie nodded, glancing over her shoulder. Her face was pale in the dim light. "Yeah. Let's just keep moving." We walked faster, but the sound followed us, footsteps echoing just behind, always just out of sight. My pulse quickened, the hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I glanced back again, only to see the alley stretching endlessly behind us. The path that should have led us back to the busier streets now seemed like an endless tunnel of darkness. The footsteps grew louder. Not just one pair now, but many, like the faint scurrying of people, just beyond our sight, just behind the corners of my perception. But no one was there. The alley remained empty, and yet the sound persisted. Then, the street in front of us shifted. At first, it was subtle, the cobblestones beneath our feet seemed to ripple, like the surface of a pond when disturbed by a stone. I blinked, thinking I was imagining things, but then the buildings on either side of us began to bend inward, their walls warping unnaturally. The windows, dark and empty, stretched into hollow eyes that seemed to watch us as we passed. Marie gasped, her grip tightening on my hand. What's happening?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice tight with fear. The street ahead of us, the one we had been walking down just moments before, no longer looked familiar. It twisted, stretched unnaturally, the buildings leaning in as though trying to crush us. I felt my stomach twist in knots. A sudden feeling of being trapped swept over me. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, each beat pounding as though it were a drum echoing in the silence. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body was frozen. We started running. I don't know why, maybe we thought if we moved fast enough, we could escape whatever this was. But no matter how fast we ran, the street kept twisting and lengthening, the buildings bending in impossible ways. Then, the whispering started. It was soft at first, barely more than a murmur. But it was unmistakable, my name. David. I froze, pulling Marie to a halt beside me. Did you hear that? Hear what? She asked, her voice trembling. The whisper. It said my name. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands trembling as I tried to comprehend what was happening. We need to get out of here. We ran again, but the whisper followed us, growing louder, more insistent. David. David. The air thickened even more, pressing down on us like a weight, suffocating. The walls of the alley seemed to close in, the shadows warping and moving, like they were alive, stretching toward us. I turned to Marie, panic rising in my throat. We're not alone. Something's following us. Her face twisted with fear. We have to get out of this alley. We need to get back to the main road. But the alley wasn't an alley anymore. The ground beneath our feet was warping, the cobblestones cracking and falling away into nothingness. The world around us twisted and blurred, and I realized with a sickening jolt that this wasn't real. It couldn't be. Then I saw it. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, stood at the far end of the alley. Its limbs were too long, too sharp, its skin pale and sickly under the flickering light. But it was the eyes, too dark, hollow voids, that sent ice through my veins. Marie, look. I pointed at the figure, but when she turned to look, her face twisted in confusion. There's nothing there, David, she said, her voice tight with fear. But I could see it. The figure moved closer, its movements slow and deliberate. The shadows around it twisted and shifted, as if they were alive. I grabbed Marie's arm. We have to run. Now. We turned and ran, but the world around us continued to warp and twist, the alley growing longer, the buildings bending in impossible ways. The whispers followed us, louder now, echoing in my mind. David. You can't escape. My heart pounded in my chest, my legs burning as we sprinted through the twisted alley, but no matter how fast we ran, the figure stayed with us, always just at the edge of my vision. Then we reached the bridge. It was one of those older bridges over the Seine, with low stone walls and iron railings. The river below was dark, almost black, and the air was thick with the smell of damp stone and stagnant water. We need to cross, I said, my voice shaking. But as we stepped onto the bridge, the world shifted again. The bridge stretched out before us, impossibly long, the river below twisting and churning in unnatural ways. The shadows around us deepened, and the streetlights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. I turned to Marie, but she was staring straight ahead, her eyes wide with terror. Marie? She didn't respond. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. It was like she couldn't hear me. She started walking forward, toward the edge of the bridge. Marie, stop! I shouted, grabbing her arm, but she pulled away from me, her movements stiff and unnatural. I ran in front of her, trying to block her path. Marie, you have to stop. This isn't real. Her eyes were unfocused, her face blank, as if she were in some kind of trance. She pushed past me, her steps slow and deliberate as she approached the edge of the bridge. Marie, please! I screamed, grabbing her arm again, but she shoved me away with more force than I thought possible. I stumbled back, falling hard onto the stone. Before I could react, Marie stepped over the low wall and onto the narrow ledge at the edge of the bridge. My heart leaped into my throat. Marie, no. She turned to me, her eyes wide with fear, but it wasn't me she was seeing. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Then she fell. It wasn't a scream or a flailing of arms. She just fell, like she had been pulled down by some invisible force. I scrambled to my feet, rushing to the edge of the bridge, but when I looked down, she wasn't in the river. She had landed on the stone embankment below, her body twisted and broken on the cold ground. My breath caught in my throat as I saw her lying there, motionless, her pale face still staring up at me, blank and empty. "Marie," I whispered, my voice breaking. Then I saw it. The figure. Umbravex. It moved in the shadows beneath the bridge, its long, spindly fingers reaching out, dragging Marie's body into the darkness. I screamed, but no sound came out. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as the shadows swallowed her whole. And then she was gone. I collapsed onto the bridge, gasping for breath, my mind spinning. The world around me shifted again, the alley returning to its normal, quiet self. The buildings stood tall and silent, the cobblestones still beneath my feet. But Marie was gone. I don't remember how long I stayed there, staring at the place where she had fallen. Time seemed to blur, the hours bleeding into each other. Eventually, I stood, my legs weak and shaking, and walked back through the now empty streets of Paris. I had escaped. But Marie hadn't. I live with the memory now, the memory of those twisted streets, of Marie's pale face as she fell into the darkness. I know Umbravex is still out there, hiding in the shadows of the city, waiting for its next victim. I escaped, but only just. And every night, when I close my eyes, I can still hear the whisper. "David, you can't escape. I know it's not over." Thank you for watching Serenity Valley Stories. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another scary tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below.